One of the greatest commandments we are given is to love our neighbor. But what does this mean? Who is our neighbor? The Bible makes it clear that all of humanity is our neighbor. We must love every person, no matter how different they are. We are even called to love our enemies and to pray for those who persecute us. We must forgive others as God has forgiven us. This is our calling. This is our command. And this is our joy. Love your neighbor.
Okay, so let me guess. Not necessarily new information, correct? It's just tough to put that into practice. I read this week the story of a woman that was in the drive-through line at her favorite fast food restaurant when, and she tells the story, it's first person, she's telling the story, 83 years old, maybe struggled a little bit to get the order in. As she's there in the car behind her starts honking. And she looks in the rear view, and it's this 30-something with a mom. You can see the mom with a kiddo in the back, hitting the horn and sort of like yelling at her, like, come on, lady, come on. And so this exasperated her a little bit. She's like, oh, flustered her a little bit. So she gets up there and she thinks, well, what can I do? Well, you know what she does? She says, not only does she pay for her meal, she says, I want to pay for the meal of the car behind me. Thinking, I'm going to get her, I'm going to show her, right? So now they proceed slowly through, if you've been there, and the woman with the child comes up to the window, and she is the cashier says, hey, lady in front of you, paid for your meal. And now, what does she do? Well, she's all embarrassed, and you can see her saying, oh, I'm so sorry, my bad, you know, kind of like, oh, man, thanks for doing that. I can't believe you did that after I just honked at you. And so the 83-year-old gets up to the food window now, and she shows the receipt for her meal and takes her meal, and she shows the receipt for the meal she paid for, and she takes that meal, and she drives off. And as the 83-year-old is fond of saying, she said, you know, she said, don't tick off old people. We've been around a long time. How do we love our neighbor when they're laying on the horn behind us? Right? Karma. Let me just grab you a meal. Then there's the story of, let's see here if I've got, see if we can make this work here. See if we can make this work here. Dun, 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 dun. All right. All right. Nope, that's not it. So there's a story of, Gina, will you let me know when that gets up there, please? Story of a guy in New York City. We'll try one more time, see if we're close. I'm going to come back to Mr. Rogers. This guy right here, his name is Wesley. Wesley was a 50-something-year-old construction worker. 2007, they were on the subway platform when Cameron, 20-year-old student studying movie theater production, started having seizures on the platform. And as witnesses recalled, he sort of fell down. He had like a sudden attack that knocked him to his knees. He got back up, but now he's disoriented, and he really is sort of stumbling. And he stumbles over the platform onto the rail track. In real time, a bunch of people all there watching, horrified, what to do, right? So Wesley, this construction guy, he says, and he jumps onto the track and covered Cameron with his body, just literally moments as the train rumbled over both of them. He was called the Subway Superman. He was called the Subway Hero. It sort of was, the storyline was sort of interesting that this black construction worker rescued this white student, if you will, nothing at all in common. Why would he do that? Why would he risk his life? Why would he risk his life to jump on the tracks to save this man when everybody else that was there watched? Interesting question to think about, and I don't think you can answer it. I'm being straight, I don't think you can answer it here because this is safe. But it is curious to wonder, what would you do if you saw something like that happen unfolding in you in real time? Everyone else stood, one man jumped on the tracks and risked his body to cover the man as the train literally went over top of them. When he was asked why, Wesley said he had to make a split-second decision. He said, I don't feel like I did something spectacular. That's interesting. It's a perspective, isn't it? I don't feel like I did anything special. I just saw someone who needed help, and I did what I felt was right. You're supposed to come to people's rescue, aren't you? Aren't you? You're supposed to love your neighbor. It's the golden rule. Good Samaritan. We have Good Samaritan hospitals. We have a Good Sam RV club. The idea of the Good Samaritan that you see out in culture, I just Googled Good Samaritan here in St. Louis. There's a senior citizen, a center in Alton, a Good Samaritan Senior Citizens Center in Alton. There's a Good Samaritan hospital sort of south of us. All flow from Jesus' teaching of the story of the Good Samaritan. That's where it gets. It's not like somebody goes, oh, hey, let's come up with this one. It comes out of the story in Luke 10 of Jesus telling the story of the Good Samaritan. And if you have a Bible, in fact, if you want to open it, or if you've got a Bible app there, Mr. Rogers is the guy who sort of made the idea of having a neighbor fun.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood.
There it is. Crank it up.
Beautiful day for a neighbor.
How many of you remember the song?
Would you be mine?
Just me.
Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you, so let's make the most of this beautiful day. Beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor?
31 years. When the idea was pitched of this old guy doing a children's show, it was sort of immediately met with rejection because who would think about kids being attracted to that? 1962, that thing made its run all the way to 1993, one of the longest running children's shows out there. I grew up watching it. Probably some of you have watched it. The reruns are still out there. Won't you be my neighbor? That's an interesting theme. That was his question, right? That's how he started every show. Won't you be my neighbor? Now, Fred Rogers believed that community was available for everybody, that we really ought to be a part of this thing called life, and wanted to instruct kids from their earliest ages that should be a part of who they are, trying to build that into their DNA. Who's your neighbor? Do you love your neighbor? Luke chapter 10 is an interesting story. I want to leave you with this thought that I believe that our love for the Lord Jesus may be measured by our mercy that we show towards others. Our love for Jesus may be measured in some part by the mercy that we show other people. Now, you may say to me today, hey, I really don't care about Jesus, or I'm not really sure that I love Jesus, or whatever. Totally, man, I respect that. I got no qualms with that. But I am saying that when Jesus taught this story, one of the impressions that he wanted to leave people was, if you love me, it will be evidenced Not by going to church, not by how much you put in the plate, not by the praise songs you sing, but how you treat one another. That is a tall order, right? Luke chapter 10. I'm calling it the lawyer who was looking for a loophole. Luke chapter 10 starts this way. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Expert in the law. Think of, in my world, when I went to Bible college, I had like some Old Testament professors that just knew the Old Testament backwards and forwards. They were like, you just could tell they were learned men. They were like scholars. This expert in the law, or yours might read lawyer, isn't like what we've just seen in the newspapers for weeks and weeks, lawyers arguing cases. This is someone that was steeped, knew the Old Testament, knew it, whatever hand you want to look at, they knew all the intricacies of it, and their job was to debate about it. They would just enter into discussions about, I was trying to get my arms around this, like, I'm not sure what there is to debate. Should women wear head coverings or not? Should you like walk your donkey on the Sabbath? It's just crazy to me. I just can't get there. But this was what they did. So he comes to Jesus one day, and he's trying to trip him. He's trying to, again, I said last week, the idea here of a trick question, this test question, is like if you hunt or fish, if you go out hunting and you try and trick the animal, if you fish and you try and trick the animal, every fisherman tries to trick the animal. Everyone. No one puts a bear hook in the water and says, here, come fish, right? At the very least, you put a worm on it. He'll get the worm and then he gets the hook. Put a lure out there. Shiny, looks like. What are you trying to do? You're trying to trick the fish into thinking, this is good, you'll want this, and then boom. That's the meaning of the word here, test. They're trying to get Jesus hooked. So, Jesus, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said, all right, you're a lawyer, you know the Old Testament, what's it say? You tell me. He said, verse 27, he goes back, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and love your neighbors yourself. It's pretty straightforward. What do I have to do to inherit eternal life is an interesting question. You might be asking that today. Let me put it another way for you. What do you have to do to get to heaven? I think people who think there's an afterlife want to know, if there's an afterlife, how do I get there? How do I get to heaven? Right? What would you say? It's an interesting, fair question. I ask it this way. If the Father's at the door and you knock, bam, 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 somebody here, finally, maybe Jesus answers, comes to the door, and you said, hey, can I get in? And Jesus were to say to you, he's not trying to trick you up. He just simply asks you a simple, straightforward question. Why should I let you in? What would you say? And however you might answer that question is going to give you a clue into what you think, how someone gets to heaven. Here's what I hear people say often. This is not far-fetched. They'll start going down a list of things they've done. Well, when Aunt Martha was sick, it was me and my family, we helped her out, we stepped up, we gave some money. When that person was down on their luck on the street corner, I gave them a $5 so they could get some coffee. My parents took me to church when I was real small, and I went until I couldn't stand anymore, but Jesus has got to count for something, right? I went to church all those times as a little kid. All you're doing is showing me that you think heaven is based on what you do. It doesn't matter what it is. You're telling me by your words that it's your actions that matter how you get to heaven. And that's all. Process it. Just think it through. Is it number of Hail Marys, you say? Some think so. Did you go on Christmas and Easter? Did you get baptized? Did you give money to the church? What did you do? Jesus said, he didn't ask what you did. He would just simply ask you, why should I let you in? To my house, my party, why should you come in? Well, Jesus, I'm a pretty good person. Look at what I've done. That's what the lawyer's asking. Jesus, what do I have to do? What must I do? And then it's interesting, to inherit. Think about that one for a little second. How do you get an inheritance? What do you have to do to get an inheritance? Anything you have to do to get an inheritance, or is it given to you? Something you inherit. Something that someone else has decided they're going to pass along to you, and you inherit it. For some of you, it's simply you're in the family. That's how you would have access to the inheritance. You're one of the family. Well, what did you do to be one of the family? You were born. Jesus looks at the guy and says, well, then you tell me. You're Mr. Lawyer, you're Mr. Expert. What would you tell somebody who said, how do I get to heaven? And this guy gets it right. He says, you need to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, and your strength. And then you need to love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus says, you've got it right. You do this and you will live. Look at verse 28. I love it. You answer correctly. Ding, 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 ding. You win. Right answer. And the guy does something interesting here, right? He then says, he doesn't say, no, think about what he could have said. What he doesn't say is, that's pretty tall order, Jesus. How do I do that? Doesn't do that. He doesn't say, Jesus, that's impossible. I mean, I know what it says, but nobody can live up to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, strength. No, we can't do that. And then love our neighbor? It's interesting to me that he passes on the I don't know how to love God question, and he jumps to, well, who's my neighbor? Jesus, who's my neighbor? I mean, if I'm supposed to love my neighbor as myself, being a good Jewish guy that I am, I think I know the answer to that one, Jesus, but you tell me, right? And if you've grown up in church at all, you're probably familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan. It goes sort of like this. There was one day, a guy's coming home from a Trump rally, and he's got a MAGA hat on, and he's got a red shirt on, and he's all pumped. And he got off the interstate because he was looking for a place to eat. Finds a place to eat, he gets turned around. He ends up in a neighborhood that's maybe not the best neighborhood in the area. And as he has a stop sign, he sees a guy in a corner, and he rolls down his window, and he says, hey, how do I get back to the interstate? And this guy in the corner, seeing a guy with a Make America Great hat on and a Trump 2024 shirt on, looks at this guy and says, this guy's a mark. And he signals to his buddy, and before the guy in the car knows it, he's got 3 guys on him, and they open his car door, and they pull him out, and they beat him. And they rip off his shirt. One guy takes the hat and throws it, and they leave him there in the middle of the pavement as they drive his vehicle, laughing all the way, and get out of there. As fate would have it, there's a church on the corner. And the guy manages to crawl to the door, and he knocks on the door. And this pastor, priest type guy comes out, and he says, how can I help you? How can I help you? You're bleeding, your nose, you're just battered, right? And he says, how can I help you? He said, hey, I just got jumped. Any chance? And the pastor, priest type dude says, man, I'm right now in the middle of Bible study. Now's not a good time for me, but there's an urgent care a mile up the street. If you just go up the street for a mile, you'll find a TAC. Is that right? Total access care, right? You just go up there, man, they'll take care of you. It's like, man, can you call somebody for me? No, man, I gotta get back to my Bible study. And pastor priest type dude closed the door. Man, guy at church won't help you. Who's gonna help you? He's sitting there on a curb, and he's just aching. Car pulls up. It's got a Nikki Haley bumper sticker on it. Nikki 2024. And they look out and they see the person on the side of the road there. And that guy's going, can you help me? Can you help me? And the person says, oh, actually, side glance, doesn't roll the window down, gets out of there. Guy's there about another 20 minutes, and two biker guys roll up. One guy, which you rarely see bumper stickers on bikes, but this guy had one. He's got a Biden-Harris 2024 bumper sticker on the back of his bike. And the other guy's got a Black Lives Matter bumper sticker on the fin of his bike. And this guy on the ground is like, you could just sort of see, like he's just looking the other way. He's not making eye contact, and these guys stop at that same stop sign where he got jumped. And they kick their bikes over, and they get off, and they go to the guy and say, man, how you doing? He doesn't really talk to him. He's a little nervous because he's been beaten once, right? He says, how you doing? Can we help you? The guy says, oh, man. Any chance, any way? He's like, they tend to him for a little bit. He said, yeah, okay, can you move? Yeah. Get on our bike. We'll take you. The guy's like, oh, man, get on your bike. Man, can you just call somebody? So no, just it'll be quicker. Get on our back of our bike, we'll go. So the guy climbs on his bike, and off they go down to the hospital. What are the chances of that happening? If you said slim and none, you understand full well the story of the Good Samaritan. The Jews hated the Samaritans. The Samaritans hated the Jews. We tell this story and it doesn't really touch us. We can't relate. What are the odds of a couple of Biden-Harris people supporting a MAGA Trump guy? What are the odds? What are the odds of a Trump guy helping out a couple of Biden-Harris people? Feel the tension? They felt the tension. They full well understood what Jesus was saying, and it didn't sit well. So Jesus says to the lawyer, he said, which of the three guys do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robber? And the guy couldn't even utter the words, the Samaritan. He couldn't even say it. He said, the guy who showed mercy on him. And Jesus said, we'll go and do the same thing. Love your neighbor. I like people in my tribe. I have a box that I like. If you fit in my box, we can get along. If you're outside my box, it's tough, isn't it? Do you have a box? Do you have a box you put people in? Are there certain people you will help or not help based on your box? I asked the question, in Jesus' story, the guy who came along, the Samaritan, was riding a donkey, and so I asked the question, why don't people get off their donkey? Why won't people get off their derriere and help? Why won't people get off their donkey and help? I don't think it makes people bad. I think it's interesting to think about this. Why don't people help other people? I think the convenient one is we're too busy. Pretty busy, right? Tough to be stopped, right? You got your world, you got your kids. Someone needs help. It's sort of an inconvenience to you. Man, I would, but sometimes they don't fit your box. They don't fit your tribe. They don't look like you. They don't talk like you. Sometimes you're threatened by their success. If you help somebody at work and they're moving up the ladder, would it mean you'd have to take a step back if you help somebody? Oh, man, what would that mean? Sometimes we don't help people because we don't feel like we know enough. Don't know enough. What if I do it wrong? You know, they have Good Samaritan law. You know what the Good Samaritan law is? If you stop and try and help somebody, you can't be held criminally liable unless it's proved that you deliberately were negligent in offering that help. But if in good faith you're trying to help somebody, that you cannot be taken to court for that. Do you find it interesting that we have to enact a Good Samaritan law to protect people who might want to help other people, but might be then, if you did something wrong, they'd take you to court for it? That's an interesting thought. You might feel like, oh, I don't know. I'd help out with students, but I just don't know students. I'd help out with kids, but I don't know kids. I don't know. I don't know. There are a lot of reasons that people won't get off their donkey. I find most of them are excuses. You don't have good rationale. You have an excuse that you've got to come up with. Why? Why? To justify yourself. That's what the lawyer did. He wanted to justify himself. He wanted to make himself look good in the eyes of others. You spend much time trying to make yourself look good in the eyes of others, and so you think of your rationale and your reasons why you won't get off your donkey. If you can relate, you can understand how the lawyer felt, what was going through his head. And so when you came to the part of the story where Jesus said, hey, here's the guy, and he did this, everybody would have been blown away. No way does that happen. Why would you help somebody else? Why would you care about somebody else? Why would you give a hoot? Why would you spend your money to help? Why would you give your time to help? Those are fair questions to ask. When was the last time you helped somebody? When was the last time you went out of your way to help somebody? When you helped somebody and it wasn't convenient for you? That's an interesting question to ask yourself. How long has it been? Can you remember? If you can't remember, what does that mean? Either maybe you're helping people all the time and they blend together, or it's been a very, very long time since you went out and you inconvenienced yourself to care about somebody else. But we're supposed to love our neighbor. Won't you be my neighbor? What are three traits, three things that I think I can learn from? And this is what I mean by this. I've asked myself, what can I see here that will help me as I'm going through this? Let me give them to you. Three qualities of people who love Jesus, who are looking to show mercy. The first is this, that they have their eyes up, they have their eyes open, and they're looking. It's so easy to go through life with blinders on. You don't see anything besides yourself, your needs, your family. To go out into the world and have your eyes up and you're just aware. You're listening to conversations. How many of you can hear words? Probably most of us. I have hearing aids to help me, but yes, right? How many of you hear words? How many of you hear feelings? Wouldn't you agree that you can hear words and miss the feelings, miss how it's coming out, miss reading what's going on in the person, how they respond? Have you ever encountered somebody that says, I'm okay, no, really, I'm okay? Are they okay? No, they're not. How many of us would pursue that? How many of us would say, I just don't want to get in that conversation because I don't have time. I don't know what to do. I don't know what I would say. Then you understand it. But people that are looking to follow Jesus are not afraid of that. They're not afraid of entering into hard conversations. They're not afraid of checking in on people to see how they're doing. I think that's one of the traits that happens when Christ invades us and fills us and gives us a love. That love for Jesus is measured by how I respond to you. And you can't say you love Jesus and have disregard for the people around you. That's what John said. You can't do that. The two are like, boom, boom, no. So, this guy, he's traveling along, he's on his business trip, and the text reads that when he came to where the man was, when he saw him, who do you see? In my notes here, I say that when we love others, we see obstacles as opportunities. What looks like things we can't do on the outside become things that maybe there's a door there that we can walk through to show the love of Christ. What did he see? I asked myself that question, and it was interesting to think about. The man had no clothes on. He was stripped naked. He was beaten. He saw a bloody, beaten up guy. He didn't have clothes on, which in their world, your clothes identified whose tribe you were with. Samaritan, Jew, was how you dressed. That was all gone. We do the same thing today. Our clothes identify us. In fact, our clothes usually go a long ways towards establishing what tribe we're in. Where do you shop? Where do you buy your clothes at? Why do you care? How many of you sometimes are embarrassed about saying, well, I buy my clothes at Goodwill? Oh man, I wouldn't say that. Would I ever say, I buy my clothes at Von Maur? Oh, you might not say that either, right? Right? They have great sales, by the way. Just kidding. Yeah. All right. But you can understand, that's how we identify ourselves. Our cars, our clothes, our hobbies, our neighborhoods. And if you don't fit in that mark, the people who are following Jesus, they're asking questions. They're looking. They're seeing. The second thing is, I just see they're willing to get involved. It says here, the text reads that he had compassion on him. You know what compassion is? It's just, NIV says pity. It's the word for compassion. It means that you have sympathy and that you're willing to act. Sympathy is something you feel. Compassion is something you do. Some of us feel bad for people in situations and we don't do anything. That's the difference. Compassion acts. So you can say you hurt for them, and that's good and that's admirable. That's a feeling inside. Jesus would say we need to move past the feelings to doing something about it. What can I do about it? How could I alleviate? How could I make this situation better? That's what Christ is calling us to, is being willing to get involved and get our hands dirty and act. You're at work and somebody needs help at work. Can you get out of your schedule to help and help them move forward? Someone needs help with an assignment. They missed time because they were sick. Do you have the time to help them catch up? Or were you just like, hey man, that's your problem. Sorry, feel bad for you. I do, I honestly feel bad for you. I just can't help you. Here's a question that I have for you. It's an honest question. When was anybody in the just go back a year. Go back 1 year for me. All right, that's all I need you to do, not your lifetime, last year. Anybody come across anybody beaten and robbed in the last year? Anybody at all? Just put your hand up. I mean, you might win a prize. That's a lie. Okay, so there's not a hand that went up. So Warman, what are you talking to me about? I just don't encounter people who are beaten and robbed, right? Isn't that fair? Right? And do you understand? Now let's back up just a step to what I just said to you. Following Jesus means we got our eyes up and we got our ears open and we're listening. Anybody know a single mom that's been beaten, robbed of her dignity, of her income, of her self-respect because someone left her for someone else? Did you say they're not beaten and robbed? Anybody know a student whose alcoholic or abusive parent has beaten and robbed them of joy of childhood? They're just grown up normal in a normal home, but nope, they're always walking on eggshells because their parents out of control. Anybody know anybody like that? Anybody know a guy who maybe has been riddled and made to feel inferior at work because someone else wants to bypass him on the ladder. And he's been beaten and he's been robbed of his dignity. Anybody know anybody? I think there are beaten and robbed people all around us. You're looking for someone laying in a ditch. Jesus is saying, get your eyes off yourself and have conversations with people and listen. And if you will do that, you will find that there's a world of broken people. And then what will you do? And that's why I don't want to. I don't want to know. I really don't want to know how bad you got it, because I got it bad too, right? My life's not all rosy, right? What do I do if I encounter you and you're beaten and robbed? Man, isn't it just better to have my head in the sand and not care, not know? Except Jesus doesn't leave me that option. He's the one who said, okay, you want to talk about your neighbor? Let's talk about your neighbor. What's going on in their world? Are you willing to get involved? Any of you guys outdoor people? Anybody? I'm really not, and it just is. It's just, I didn't grow up in that world, right? They say that this year is about to be the busiest year of people dying, trying to reach, which mountain is it? What's the big one? There you go. As of 2006, more than 2,700 people had reached the top of the world's tallest mountain. They pay over $60,000 for the trip. But because of this, I've read a couple articles. I've seen one kind of documentary. Because of this, the amount of people going up, the mountain can't sustain it. And so the number of people dying on the trip or on the way down is increasing. And one of the things that's interesting is the number of people who are dying as people walk by them. And I get it. I totally, honestly understand it. You only have enough oxygen for you. Man, it's so bad your oxygen ran out. How can there's nothing I can do. They quote, there's a guy, David Sharp, in March of 2006. He was a 34-year-old engineer from Cleveland. He reached the top. However, he ran out of oxygen on the way back down. He was 984 feet from the top. They say as he was dying, 40 climbers passed him by. 40 people walked by him. As a result, he froze to death. Now, according to this gentleman who has scaled 14 of the world's 8,000-meter mountains, his death is not unique. Passing people who are dying is not uncommon. Unfortunately, there are those who say, it's not my problem. I've spent all this money, and I'm going to get to the top. Is that how you view life? You've spending all this money, and you're going to get to the top, and if someone's in your way, you're just going to step over them. If I'm producing tension in your spirit right now, I intend to. Because that's what people without Jesus do. But people with the love of Christ, we should be different. Leads me to the third observation, that they are people who are generous with their time and their stuff. This guy put the man on his donkey, bandaged his wound, took him to the inn, said, I'll pay for whatever needs. I'll be back in a couple of days. I'll give you more if he exceeds that. You understand that you have been blessed in order that you might be a blessing. That is why God has given you health. That is why God has given you resources, so that you might be a blessing to other people. And when you hoard, when you keep it for yourself, you're going totally against the grain of what Christ talked about. Greater love has this than he would lay down his life for his friend. That's what we're called to do. And I don't think many of us are going to be called to jump on a track like Wesley was. But you might be put in an uncomfortable situation where you have to say, hey, you know what? that the love of Christ would be magnified. Christ be magnified in me. Love that song. So what's that look like when you're out there living in the world? What's it look like for Jesus to be large in you? I will tell you one way is how you treat others and how you treat people that are not like you. Not how you treat the people who are like you, but how the people are different from you. Find it interesting that we're having discussions on race at Howell High School, in the Howell School District. Don't tell me it's not affecting this community. School board voting one day, we're going to do this, and a week later they rescind the vote. Why is that? Questions on race on the campaign trail, candidates being asked, hey, what was the Civil War about? Interesting question, isn't it? How you treat people that aren't like you? How you treat the refugees that may cross your path? How do you treat the person who's been beaten by life, crosses your path? Christ would say, don't dismiss them. Don't look the other way. Look for ways, look for opportunities to be generous with your time and your stuff. 2017 Psychology Today article said that the average household spends $2,000 of their income a year on other people. That's $177 a month. In St. Charles County? Really? $177 a month. That's all you spend on average. Why would you help students? They're not like you, they're not your tribe. Why would you care about students? Why would it matter? Why would you volunteer? Why would you give your time to be involved in student ministry? Why would you care about kids? Why would you be involved in children's ministry? Why would you lead a study? Invite other people into your home. You don't know a lot, you don't know that much, right? Man, let somebody else do it. Somebody else's problem, right? Jesus would say, who's his neighbor? See, the question isn't who is your neighbor. It's not the question. You're asking the wrong question. It's not who is your neighbor. Here's the question that you should ask yourself this week. To whom will I be a neighbor? To who will I be a neighbor? Not who is your neighbor, but who will you be a neighbor to? You're out living life, going through drive-thrus, at work. Who will you show the love of Christ to? Because you have the means, the ability, the health. God has given you that. That's what he calls us to. That's what he's asking for us. Mr. Rogers said in a 2001 commencement address at Middlebury College, when we look for what's best in the person we happen to be with at the moment, we're doing what God does. So in appreciating our neighbor, we're participating in something truly sacred. When we appreciate the person that is our neighbor, we are doing what God does. And that is truly unique and sacred when you love someone that you don't have to. Ryan's coming up. We're going to sing this last song entitled Mighty to Save. Out in the lobby, if you would be so inclined, we have 2 copies of this book, Bob Golf's Everybody Always, Becoming Love in a World Full of Setbacks and Difficult People. Great read if you've not read any of Golf's stuff. He writes in story form, but the principles and the things he says are powerful. There's 2 copies out there. Love for you to take one. The other one that I have out there is How Good is Good Enough? Since nobody's perfect, since none of us are perfect, how good do you have to be to get to heaven? Sort of touches on the question I asked a little bit ago, right? If you have to be good to get to heaven, let me say I buy your argument. You have to be good to get to heaven. Well, then just tell me how good you have to be. You have to be a 10 out of 10? Can you get into heaven if you were a 7 out of 10? Does 4 out of 10, but your intentions are you're well-meaning? Does that get you in? How good do you have to be? It's a great question. It's a great read. It's a simple read, and it's something you might take to share with somebody else. Maybe you're having a conversation with somebody, and that's their line of thinking. You can just say, hey, you know what? If you have to be good to get to heaven, well, just tell me how good. Mother Teresa good? Pastor good? How good? Right? Both of those are free out in the lobby. Let's stand. We're going to sing Mighty to Save with Ryan.